thank the Hunter Museum for being willing to host this event. I think it's one of the most important things happening today because of the content, the concept of love and equality. I think there's no better way to celebrate the life of Dr. Martin Luther King. I also especially want to thank Madera. Madera has just been so wonderful to work with, and she's so enthused about what we're doing. In fact, I want to give her special credit for something. Previously, our panelists have been speaking on the topic of what's difficult about being a Muslim, a Christian, a Jew, etc., and living in Chattanooga. And we had some really lively sessions with that, but Adara suggested a new direction today, and I really like it. In fact, we may want to carry forth with this in some other settings. She said, let's talk about love and equality. And as I just said, I can think of no better way to relate to the meaning of what Dr. King's life was all about. So that is what our panelists will be doing. This is our 10th presentation. We have made a panel presentation at the Jewish Cultural Center, at the Islamic Center of Greater Chattanooga. We did a presentation at the Hindu Temple, and then 6 different Christian congregations across the city. And all of them have been unique and really pretty exciting. And I hope you will experience that today. Just a word about the format. We'll sit down in just a second. When I do that, our panelists will begin introducing themselves, and as they introduce themselves, after they introduce themselves, they are going to share from their heart, their mind, what they believe and feel about love and equality, particularly as it relates to building community.
I'm Michael DeZick. I'm the Executive Director of the Jewish Federation of Greater Chattanooga. I've been there almost 20 years now, and I'm a born, native, and raised Chattanoogan. So I've been in Chattanooga all my life, other than a few years away when I was in college. One of the things that's very unique about this panel is the panelists are lay leaders. We are not reverends, we are not pastors or rabbis or imams, so you just get a lay leader's perspective of our opinions. And as they say, you know, if there's 5 of us up here, that must mean there's 10 or 12 opinions that you'll hear. So today's theme is actually love and equality. I want to start by saying how proud I am. You know, here it is, Martin Luther King Day, and it's being celebrated not just here in Chattanooga, but really all around our country, of the amazing work that he did. I'm just so proud that the Jewish community was so active back in the civil rights movement. I think the Jewish community happens to be quite active now as well. This city of about 450,000, the metropolitan area in Chattanooga, and when I tell people how many Jews there are, and yet people say, but you're so active, there's only about 1,500 or 1,600 Jewish people in the Chattanooga area. And the impact I think that we have, especially again with the civil rights movement here, many of the sit-ins, all the way back to Martin Luther King himself, walking arm in arm with Rabbi Joshua Heschel, shows the uniqueness of building bridges and why we should be connecting our communities, not just because of race or religion, because we're all human beings. Now in Judaism, you know, let's remember, you know, there's lots of ways to celebrate Christianity or Hinduism or any of our religions, and there's many denominations within Judaism as well. So, but I'm going to talk from my perspective, where men and women are equal. In fact, here in Chattanooga, there's a female rabbi. Women have all the same rights within the congregation to not just only vote, but also to participate in services, and in our case, read from the Torah, or give the sermons, or however they want to be involved in the community is not only acceptable, it's encouraged. there's not really even a conversation about, well, this is what the men do and this is what the women do. It's that we are a community, which I think is very special. I also think that one of the things the Jewish community is very good at, and it's really one of our mitzvot, one of our commandments we're supposed to do, is tikkun olam. So that's a Hebrew word that means repair the world. We're supposed to be building bridges. We're supposed to be making the world a better place than the way we found it. You know, I taught my teenagers, when you spend the night at one of your friend's house, you make sure that you make your bed afterwards, and you make sure you hang your towel up and things like that. You want to leave that guest home nicer than what you found it. Well, it's the same thing in Judaism in general, that we want to make sure that we are repairing the world, that we're doing service projects. Sometimes it's a family. Sometimes it's the community that we're doing those types of things. And the last part of that is we want to make sure that not only we acknowledge the differences that we have amongst us and the way we might practice our religion, but really we have so much more in common as human beings, as Americans, as Chattanooggans, that we should be doing more of this. We should be doing more of this, breaking bread together. I know that Nora and I have had many lunches together, and Brandon, Sush, I got to meet Sush's husband, and we went out to dinner a month or two ago. So these are the types of things that have been beneficial to me just being on this panel, but hopefully sharing with others to say, let me have a better understanding of another person's perspective. Because I guarantee you, you have so much more in common with them than you do out of common. I'm going to pass it over to Nora, and obviously if there's questions, we'll take those at the end.
Allow me to convey Islamic greeting to you all. Peace be upon you. Assalamu alaikum. My name is Nur Hidayat Seswara Harjo, and I bet that nobody able to repeat my name again. So just call me Nur. Okay, I work with UTC in electrical engineering department. I've been in Chattanooga for almost, I think, 7 years. Talking about love and equality, I would like to kind of like quote some teaching in Islam, especially from the Quranic verse and from Prophet Muhammad saying. Let me quote, the first quote is from Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Oh my God, make me love you. Make me love those who love you. Make me love all things that bring me closer to loving you. Oh my God, make me love you and your angel and your prophet and all of your creations. Oh my God, make my love for you dearer to me than myself and my family and my wealth and my children. So I think this kind of like bring the true meaning of love. That love is not expecting something in return, but it is what giving something to, and you don't expect anything else than express your love to all the creations, not just to humanity, but practically to anything else, any creations. And there is a beautiful verse that I believe is very relevant on what the theme of today's presentation is. One of the verse from the Quran that said, O mankind, indeed we have created you from male and female, and have made you into nations and tribes, and that you may know one another. Indeed, most honor of you in the sight of God is the most righteous. So as we can see over here, practically, we come from the single soul. That God intended to create us from two different nations and different tribes, but not because of one is superior than another, but we are equal, and the intended mission is to know each other, not to despise each other. So I think this is kind of like a straightforward that I don't see why that, this kind of feeling that somebody feel better because of certain feature of the individual, but in the sight of God is the piety, the righteousness. And let me quote one more which is the saying of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, in the time when he stand before around 100,000 companions. It is what they call it the last sermon. Okay, so he said, "O mankind, your Lord is one, and your Father is one. You're all descended from Adam, and Adam was created from earth. He is most honored among you in the sight of God is who is most upright. No Arabs is superior to non-Arabs, no colored person to white person, and or white person to a colored person except the piety." Just amazing. 1400 years ago, somebody, it doesn't matter who he is, but somebody who's saying 400 years ago that said that just because of your skin color is different, you feel better about others. And it is kind of like a shame, okay, and disgusting that you still facing this today's society that somebody feel better to one another just because of something different. So let me allow me to add, because when I believe that love and equality, it would be completed by justice. Because just equality, there's no justice. I don't feel complete. So let me quote one verse, and it is very relevant with the quote that the saying of Dr. Martin Luther King. The first from the Quran, it says, "O you who believe, stand out firmly for justice as witnesses to God, even it is against yourself, your parent, and your relatives, or whether it is against the rich or the poor." Indeed, that Dr. King said, the ultimate tragedy is not the oppressions or cruelty by the bad people, but the silence offered that by the good people. Thank you.
I grew up in India most of my life, and I moved to America 15 years ago. And I live in Chattanooga with my husband and my two little boys, Nick and Neil, and they're 8 and 10. And I'm really sorry I haven't prepared for this speech. We've had lots of sickness and birthdays and the holidays. So I'm just going to speak from the top of my head. So, I'm no expert. In fact, I was like, why am I talking about this today? Because I don't feel any more qualified than any of you, and so I'm really honored to be asked to be on this panel. And I love these guys. We've been on the road for almost a year, and I love everyone here and love listening to their perspectives and getting to know them better. I've also loved going and seeing and meeting different faith groups and churches. And growing up in India, I really thought Christianity was one religion, and coming to Tennessee was an eye-opener. I had no idea there were so many different churches and different beliefs within Christianity. And I really I was so glad to be a part of it because of the reception we got, and I found that people are eager to know about each other, and that's a big step. I think it's a very progressive step, that people are curious to know and they want to educate themselves on what it is to be a person from another perspective. So coming back to today's topic, where Martin Luther King is a hero of mine. Who are growing up, we grew up in India, and I'm not going to lie and say everything was perfect. In India, we didn't see equality. It was basically the survival of the fittest, where you have to be the top, the cream of the crop, the top cream, to make it anywhere. There is inequality in socioeconomic status, more than, we don't have race, but we have our own caste. We have so many things in India but I think mostly the socioeconomic status, which so everyone wants to come to America. You look up to America as this shining example for hard work. And then when you come here, I think lately there have not been good things going on. There's a lot of hatred. And I was really shocked to know that segregation is almost as old as me. I thought it was way beyond, I thought America's moved beyond that, but it's been an eye-opener coming here and meeting people, and I really want to be a part of change. And I feel like we shouldn't be like people observing from the sidelines, but get in there, get on the ground, and do some kind of groundwork. Mainly, and I feel like I contribute. I go to schools and I talk about India and our culture, and try to educate people on how we're not different. And I always talk about this one story in which we were taught as kids. It's an old Indian fable, a Hindu fable, where we talk about this frog in the well. I don't know if you've heard of this little frog. He's in a little well, and he's swimming, and that well is his life. All he knows is that round little wall, stone wall, and he can see the bright blue sky. And one day, a toad comes in from the lake nearby, and he hops in, and he's like, "Come on, let's go jump out of this well, and let's go see the world." He's like, "There is no other world. This is it, the brown walls and the blue sky." And he refuses to believe that there is a beautiful world full of trees and flowers and birds and other fishes. So that is a story of people who are not educated, who don't travel, who don't read. I mean, if you can't go out and travel, encourage your kids to read. One of my friends, she's actually started a Facebook group called Diversify Your Bookshelf, where we talk about all the different books that you can have for your kids. And diversity, it's just not based on race or culture, but different families. If you're a mixed couple, like if you're adopted. So it's really a good thing, I think, especially for kids, to be a part of this dialogue. Because when we were raised in our school, we were always taught about how everyone is equal. We had to do that for India to survive because there's a lot of animosity and riots, and so it was drilled in our head, like you have cows of different colors, but the milk is white. And think like simple allegories like that, examples to teach kids that we're all human beings. We should all love each other. And speaking of, again, Martin Luther King, and who actually, Gandhi is a big idol. He's called the father of the nation because he fought for the freedom of India from the clutches of the British, with whom we were under their rule for 200 years. And Gandhi fought for it mainly by protesting against their rule non-violently. And that was what made it powerful. We had a lot of kings who took up the sword and guns against the British, but they didn't win. Gandhi won, like the simple man with a little stick. He went there and took blows from the British, and he won it non-violently. And that is what has been carried on here, and by Martin Luther King, and that's what we knew about him back in India, about how he fought for his rights. And he is right. It is his right to be treated as a human being, to be equal to everyone. So the one thing coming from where Gandhi drew his power is from a Hindu saying about equality. It says, truth alone triumphs. So we have this as an emblem and as a saying in all over every national document. It says, ultimately, justice prevails to the truthful. So what is more truthful than love? There is nothing. Love transcends every religion, color, sex, gender, sexual orientation, and whatnot. So I believe that as a part of this, maybe go to schools, talk to little kids about how we should love each other. And I don't know why we don't make this more of a like a part of school where we talk to kids about stories where we talk about being kind. There is no kindness taught at all. It's basically who is the best in this sport, or it's very competitive. There is not kindness, and it's okay to say something rude. So anyway, I'm struggling myself trying to raising 2 kids.
Atheists, especially around here, are sort of an emerging group. It's not that it's a new idea, but it's kind of a new movement. We didn't really group together the way we do now, before 10 years ago. So as an emerging group, we we look to a lot of other places, I think, for inspiration, because we don't have any traditions that bind us just yet. But while there's no assurance that any atheist you might meet will think the same things that I do, we might say that there are some things that tend to be common, right? For example, there's a lot of atheists who are interested in social justice, you know, and I'm somewhat interested in social justice myself. So, in the spirit of that, I've always drawn a lot of inspiration from Dr. King. And in looking for some thoughts to tie everything together today, love, equality, and in the spirit of Dr. King, I came across a letter he wrote in 1952, his first year at Boston College, and it was also his first year of dating Coretta Scott. And I wanted to read a few brief tidbits from that letter. He's writing to Coretta, and on love, he says things like, "Love is such a dynamic force, isn't it? It is the most inexplicable and yet the most beautiful force in life. Oh, how joyous it is to be in it." And he also says, "How else can we express the deep emotions of life other than in poetry? Isn't love too ineffable to be grasped by the cold, calculating heads of intellect?" And then going forward, he says, by the way, to turn to something more intellectual, he says, "I imagine you already know that I am much more socialistic in my economic theory than capitalistic. And yet I am not so opposed to capitalism that I have failed to see its relative merits. It started out with a noble and high motive, vis-a-vis to block the trade monopolies of nobles. But like most human systems, it fell victim to the very thing it was revolting against. So today, capitalism has outlived its usefulness. It has brought about a system that takes necessities from the masses to give luxuries to the classes." He wasn't a huge fan, and this often gets, of capitalism, I mean, this gets left out of his history a lot, I think. And as somebody who's very interested in equality and social justice, I find that I tend to think a lot about the economics of our situation. And I think it is important that we do things like this, where people meet each other and get to know each other, and to bridge gaps. And you know, as an atheist, I feel sometimes that I'm in a unique position to do that, because I have no horse in any of the races, you could say. And in some ways, I feel obligated to reach across all the aisles whenever I can. Because being an atheist, we're all just people, as I see it, you know? Regardless of what we may think about the origins of the universe, or mankind, or morality, ultimately, we all are on this little rock together and trying to make it through. And you know, there was a preacher in the 19th century who once said, "Be kind, for everyone you know is fighting a hard battle." And I think that's sort of the attitude I take to the whole thing. And as far as equality goes, it's also, I think, important that if we love each other, you know, if we love people more than in just some sort of abstract sense, that, you know, I ask myself, what do you do for people that you love? You try to help them, you try to protect them from the things that ail them. And I feel that this is also, from what I read of Dr. King's work, his perspective on economics. He sees his economic views, it seems to me, as a form of protecting people he loves. And I think that's a message that somebody of any religion could take away from that, you know. I draw so much inspiration from his work. It's quite clear to me that above and beyond any sort of religious ideal, he cares very much for the well-being of all Americans and of all peoples in the world, you know. And yeah, I guess that's really all the talk.
My name is Jonathan Butler. I believe that the main reason I was selected to be on this panel is simply because I'm from Atlanta. I think that it is difficult to represent Christianity particularly when you are sitting next to a renowned theologian and minister in Reverend Neal. But in listening to you all, I realize why I'm going to say that I'm the closer, because the thread of what I was thinking in my remarks, particularly being from Atlanta, graduating from Emory University as a Martin Luther King Jr. Scholar, graduating from Benjamin E. Mays High School, and being the recipient of a community service award from the King Center at that time, there are these links. And I think what I would emphasize is these links that go throughout the seeds of faith. So the architect of the March on Washington, Bayard Rustin, was an atheist. King got his tutelage and study. His philosophy was largely affected by his mentoring, by his mentor, Dr. Benjamin E. Mays, who at the time was the president of Morehouse College when King was a student. Well, Mays largely informed his philosophy from two things: a thought from Carter G. Woodson and his processing of the Jewish faith, and a central tenet of that faith being based on justice. Although Dr. Mays was a noted educator, theologian, a reverend, he formulated his view of Christianity. He adopted it, not based on his Southern tradition, but in part based on this link between what he was learning from Woodson and from Gandhi. So you've got all of these seeds of varying faiths that informed one man's view of Christianity that in turn mentors the seminal advancement of not just justice, not just religion, not just peace. My brothers in the Muslim faith often refer peace be with you and also unto you. All of these seeds, I think, inform King's view of love and equality and the fierce urgency of now, the faith without works part of our doctrine, the do unto others as you have them do unto you, the love thy neighbor as thyself. These are the pervading Christian philosophies of King that were sprinkled in from all of these other different faiths, all of these different connections that really point back to this relational idea that we coexist in a society together. Together, if we see each other's common humanity, if we see each other's common place, if we see this concept of stewardship, this idea of being good to the environment, being good to what God has given us, these to me inform my own personal views of what I think about love and equality. And I think, Reverend Neal, that is perhaps my added value to this panel. My sense is one of love. That sense, as a city employee, I manage a group called Neighborhood Services and Development for the City of Chattanooga. One of the things that I think about in city government in particular is the loss of the idea of the separation between church and state. The idea our founders and the framers of the Constitution had in not recognizing a specific religion and in granting the freedom of religion was to also grant the freedom from religion. And so as a person who, from Atlanta, connections to the King legacy, connections to Jimmy Carter, who I actually love and adore as one of the people who brings us, I think, of all faiths, that attempt to be closer to love, closer to equality, closer to fairness, closer to some sense of justice. Those are the things that I think are informing to all of us, no matter what faith, no matter the ability to be free from faith. I think those principles are what I'm connecting most with on this day.
Now we come to what I think is really one of the fun parts of the program, and that is to turn it over to you, to give you an opportunity to ask the questions that really are burning in your heart or mind. So if you'll just raise your hand if you have a question.
I feel like you've all talked conceptually, and I really understand what you're saying, but on a pragmatic, specific level, are there any individual barriers we perhaps have in Chattanooga that you think we specifically need to overcome? Or are there any specific actions you would like to see taken within the city? In other words, like the specific of diversifying your bookshelf was something I'm like, okay, I can take that home. That's something I'm going to remember. And so from your other theoretical things, what might be the little nuggets of specific things that we might take home? Like, oh yeah, maybe this is what we could be doing as individuals in Chattanooga, or this is a specific barrier within our city that we need to go from. I'm just looking for the conflict.
Very good. Would someone like to speak to that?
We need to get out of the way of ourselves and put away our preconceived notions of what we have of this person or that religion or this color, or because that's not acceptable anymore. It's not acceptable. You know, when in the Jewish community, when something has happened to us, a couple of years ago, for example, a couple of our vehicles were burned, and the news and things like that, who were the first people to reach out to me? Christians, Muslims. They were here for our support. When there was the Muslim ban, I don't know whatever it was, that came down, I called up the Muslim community and said, we have to do something. We have to stand up together. That's not a Muslim issue. That's a human issue. And we went downtown, and there were 25 or 30 clergies and 50 other people from all different faith groups standing up and saying, this is not right. We have to stand together. It might not have affected me. You know, there was a poem back around the Holocaust. You know, they came for the Jews. I wasn't Jewish, so I didn't say anything. And then they came for the gypsies, but I wasn't gypsy, and so I didn't stand up. And then they came for me, and there was nobody to stand up for me. This is the problem. We have to stand up for each other. That's how these problems go away. Because if they come after me, then they've come after Noor, and they've come after everybody else. We have to stand up together, and we really have to take action. You know, when you see something on the news, or you've read something, oh, that's nice, or that's troubling to talk about at the dinner table, the next question should be, what can we do about it?
Okay, very good. Brandon, I think.
As far as barriers go towards equality, I would say that a couple of really big ones are Chattanooga's immense drop in public housing. You know, I mean, it's hard to really achieve equality among everybody when we're kicking people out of their homes. We could use better public transportation. And more money for schools, and frankly, those would be a few things I would think.
Okay.
And I'll just be real quick. I think one of the things, I see some members of a group that I'm a part of called Chattanooga Connected. And one of the things about place is trying to be intentional and trying to recognize where you are and what you can do. Just small things. So one of the premises of the group is to get people together who are different, who don't know one another, and they have a meal together. Very small, but very effective. Those things turn into networks that turn into progress in other ways, that turn into, hey, I've got a job opportunity that's available. Hey, I have a leadership opportunity that's available. Hey, I have an opening on a board that's available that I now know a qualified, diverse candidate. Diversity can be any number of things. You fill in the blanks for what that means. I think we have to be more intentional in our community about truly promoting diversity and inclusion, and what does that look like. So we oftentimes, our minds and hearts are in the right place, but we don't follow through enough with actions to do things like to hire somebody who might be different. We don't put that at the forefront of everything that we do. And just by way of a quick example, we have a lot of high-profile, very prominent organizations that when you look at the makeups of the people who work in those institutions or the people who are serving on boards for those institutions, they don't reflect and mirror the very diversity that we have in our community. That's small. Those are small things. Those are small changes that we can make that I think have a big impact. And yeah, sometimes that growth and progress is incremental, but you have to start by making intentional steps to do things like change the people I interact with in order to make some types of difference.
How has your faith informed your responses or belief in society in our current political climate? So how has your faith shaped your response or approach to belief in the society in our current political climate?
Very big and good question. Who would like to speak to that?
You want us to talk about politics?
I want you to talk about how your faith is getting you through the current political climate.
This is the hard questions, and I don't think, I can, represent all Muslim, but in my personal belief, with this kind of situations, so what? Life goes on. And then, it's always trial. In fact, the trial and difficulty, if you pass from it, you will get it better. So, anytime, when I read the history, even the life of our Prophet Muhammad, he went through trial and tribulation. Very, very tough. Even worse than what, personally as a Muslim, this is nothing. So I always reflect what he experiencing in his life and in my life. So I don't see this as something like, end of the day or end of the world. So it is kind of give me hope that, at the end, on the tunnel, you will see light and, they'll be better. And I believe that, strongly believe that.
Talk about faith.
I think in Judaism, we're taught to have a lifelong learning. And if I'm talking to my children, do I want to talk to them for what I want them to hear me saying, or what they should be understanding of my words? So it's not just that I have to be able to communicate with them. I want to make sure they communicate the way that I want them to hear me. Now, we have to be sensitive in the political climate because, look, at least in Tennessee, the majority of Tennessee agrees with the political climate that we're in today. So we have to be sensitive that there's other perspectives. Personally, when I look back at my faith, I want to try to understand where the other people are coming from that I might disagree with. I might be listening to different news reports. Maybe I'm reading different newspapers. Maybe I'm online. Maybe I'm talking about it with people that I agree with or disagree with. I think what's happened in our society is that we're listening to one news feed, and it just reinforces where we are and reinforces where we are. So now we become them and us, when it really should be we, right? It should be we. So that's what I do. When I have to look back and have to go to sleep at night, and what I want my children to wake up with the next day is to have an understanding that we have to understand where other people are coming from as well. But it's tough.
I can't resist adding to that, Stacy, that Muhammad, Moses, Jesus, Martin Luther King, Gandhi, great religious leaders who only got in trouble when they took on politics. You want to say something?
I just want to add on to what I spoke earlier about in Hinduism, about talking about truth always wins. And if you read any of our Hindu mythologies or through whatever they're put through, ultimately the good always wins. And that is what motivates me to be good and teach my kids that no matter what happens, you be good. And then when you hear somewhere someone being like that injustice happening, speak out. Stand up for the truth, stand up for the good. And that's how we're going.
I suppose having no faith really, I'm a philosophy major. I like to think of myself as a philosopher, or if I'm not one yet, maybe one day I'll get to be one. And you might say it's my philosophy that informs my perspective, or at least reading various philosophies, the diversity of philosophies. And you know, one of the key features of philosophy is uncertainty. And these are very uncertain times, so it seems very fitting to be an uncertain person. It seems like every day I change my outlook on things, but you know, certainly there are certain things that stay the same. But I credit it more to lifelong learning than to any particular dogmatic point of view.
Jonathan, you want to have a word?
Well, I'm a believer that with challenges come opportunities. And faith teaches me a few things. One about forgiveness, and one about this sort of spirit of love that permeated with King. People don't recognize how much of a revolutionary Jesus was. I think the way we have canonized him in some ways takes away the strength of his revolutionary vision, ideology, belief. The same about King. People don't recognize how terribly difficult, how much strength is required in nonviolence. To be persecuted and to not respond with what I believe is the natural tendency to hit back. If we go back in our collective memory to think about the images that happened in this country, dogs and lynchings and bricks. Representative John Lewis suffered on the Edmund Pettus Bridge. That's real. The strength that it requires for a man or woman to not return violence with violence, I think, is the central theme that continues to permeate through advanced societies. I mean, now we're talking about a lot of rhetoric with North Korea, nuclear types of discussions. For me, how faith informs my view and my worldview is, it is for us to as Gandhi would say, be the change we want to see. The great thing about humanity is when bad things happen, we can change the future. We can change things. And so I really do believe that with challenges come opportunity, and I think that this is a good point in our history to be able to connect with history in a way that informs where we will go in the future. And I believe that truth, reconciliation, forgiveness. All those things that are part of my faith are what propel me to also move forward to go ahead and make those changes.
The real image I got from the whole panel was how the seeds are cross-pollinated through the faith. And the other image, which was on 60 Minutes last night, was walls and cobble. And then walls and whatever, Bethlehem, Jerusalem, where I've been. Walls in hate around to protect property. And then walls that are part of the politics today. But the seeds, the gardens that are planted in this city, inner city gardens that are on streets, it's a real concrete kind of representation of the seeds that have cross-pollinated philosophically and religiously. And the greatest revolution began, I kept reading the Magnificat. It's the rich have sent away empty. And how do we make that happen without scaring capitalists, or how do we love one another in the midst of an incredible time of fear, whether it's North Korea or here, right here on our streets? So that's the question.
Very good. Someone like to speak to that?
All I can really tell you is I've been asking myself exactly the same question for months. And I still haven't found a great answer. I mean, I'm the furthest thing from a perfect person. I get angry a lot. The more tragedies I see on television, the more angry I get. And depending on how I'm feeling from day to day, sometimes I wouldn't mind if the capitalists were scared. Maybe they should be. It's how I feel half the time, if I'm being honest. But, and then it begs the question of love. People throw that concept around a lot. But to me, part of what it means to love someone, again, is protection. And let's just say, for the sake of argument, you've got two people. You've walked in on a situation where one of them is hitting the other. You don't know anything else. You just see that happening. You want to stop the harm from being done. You could love both of them, but you may still have to stand up for the person who's getting beat at the time. And that may mean having to do things in self-defense that don't seem terribly loving. Ethical conundrums are ethical conundrums for a reason. There's no easy answers sometimes. And sometimes the urgency of the situation may require things that don't seem terribly loving. I don't know. That's not a terribly optimistic response, but it's the best I've got for you right now.
Jonathan?
I'll say one thing. The fall of great societies have always been predicated on trying to keep people out. No great society has survived in trying to keep people out. Walls don't keep people out. That's one thing I'll say. The second thing I'll say is this. Economic imbalance, economic inequality, the things that tend to denigrate great societies, economic inequality and imbalance, plague, disease, famine, those types of things, natural disaster. Some, I would argue many of which are, I'm going to say this, my faith tells me that God gives us free will. And within that context, we make decisions, we make choices. Those choices have reverberating effects down the line. But I would say this as a warning to us and as a way to bring us all together. Societies that find ways to to be more inclusive, that find ways to appropriately distribute wealth, where it is not disproportionately in favor of one or the other. Societies that work together collectively to be responsible for the environment, those societies have greater opportunities to succeed. You look at throughout and I'm not gonna bore you with a dissertation about how great societies fall, but oftentimes it is on the depletion of resources in ways that create some type of imbalance in their ecosystem. We have to be very careful that we look at the world that God has given us and become much more closely connected to how we all impact that. The world is not just to have this nationalized identity now it really does us a disservice because competition is global. The space and ability to solve problems is global. It's larger than just and I'm a Southerner, but this notion of dividing lines based on race, based on sexual orientation, based on poverty, those types of things will continue to make sure that our society does not progress. And the lack of progression has all types of effects, from economics to value to worth to feeling. And so we're in a dangerous position of losing sort of our place in the rest of the world. We have, since World War II, been the preeminent country of thought, of advancement, of technology, of well-being, all these types of things, in my opinion, because we welcome diversity. So I think just to close that loop on that, my sense is the more walls we try to erect, the more likely we are to suffer the same fate as the Romans or the Mayans or Incas or any other civilization that predates us that was wildly successful and it didn't last.
Thank you, Jonathan. We only have a minute or two left. We're trying to keep faith with the 2 o'clock hour because there are so many other things happening today, especially those things related to the MLK celebration. So we must draw this to a conclusion. I would like to say, before dismissing, that if you represent a group within our city that would like to host the Interfaith panel, going to hang around for a little while. I'd love to talk to you about what's involved in hosting the panel because I guess we've had about 1,000 people to hear it over the 10 times we've done it, but that leaves quite a few people yet to be engaged in this dialogue. So if you feel like you know a group that would like to be the venue for our next presentation, we would like to know about it. Again, let's give the panelists